And good afternoon, everyone. TJ Alls, I-45 Now, Galveston Now, along with Dr. Philip Keiser, the CEO of the Galveston County Health District and also the local health authority for Galveston County. Dr. Keiser, happy Mardi Gras to you.
Happy Mardi Gras.
We'll talk about this a little bit. You look like you and your wife had a good time at Mardi Gras this weekend.
Yeah, we had a great time.
And, although all of you that got chintzy beads from Dr. Keiser, we'll talk about that a little bit later. He ran out, you poor people. I'm sorry. He and I have been having some fun talking about that here. And actually will be a topic we'll talk about here as we talk about COVID-19. This is really, it's in a way, we're coming up on what would be the second anniversary for our area of COVID-19. We were already at Mardi Gras in 2020 talking about COVID-19 in a national respect and looking out for it, but we've not seen a lot of action here. And then all of a sudden, right after Mardi Gras had happened, we started seeing a cancellation of the rodeo and things started coming out. And then the first cases started popping up in Galveston County. We'll talk more about that because I will let, as a programming note, the next 2 weeks, Dr. Keiser will be out and not be on the air with us here, just so people are aware. So this will be our last show of February, and then we'll go the first 2 weeks of March without a show, and then we'll come back afterwards on that. So if you got any questions, make sure you get them in today. So let me just ask now, though, 2 years down the road, let me just ask this, what have we seen that we, as we've progressed with how we treat COVID, how we react to COVID, and the like in just Galveston County specifically, and this general region, I should think.
Yeah, no, I mean, we've seen a lot of evolution in how we've reacted to it. Initially we went into a lockdown, right? And we're all staying home and hiding and wearing masks, and everybody was afraid to go out. And we've gotten to the point then where vaccines, I think, really were the big game changer. And we were able to get significant numbers of people in the county vaccinated. And then I think one of the most important things we also found was also that having prior COVID is also protective against getting further infection. So, and that kind of explains where we are in terms of we have significant numbers of people now that have some immunity to COVID. We'd like everybody to be fully vaccinated. Not everybody is, but even getting that one shot, even if it's not completely protective, is helpful, and it helps protect the community. So we're in about as good as a spot we've ever been as far as that goes, and the numbers really show it. And we've seen our numbers falling, and they're getting to be, this trend continues, by next week they'll be as low as they've been since this whole thing started.
Right.
But we've also seen, our therapeutics evolve. Well, the first drug we had was remdesivir. We were all very, very hopeful for that. And it turned out to be a useful drug, but it's not penicillin. We were all hopeful that it would be. You get a little bit of remdesivir and everybody would walk out of the hospital. And, obviously that didn't happen. But remdesivir did, if used early enough, did help prevent people from going on and getting a lot sicker and help prevent people from dying. And then I think the next step was with the monoclonal antibodies really have made a huge, huge difference. And now we even have pills to take. So we have a really good armamentarium that we've had a chance to vet and use. Here initially, very early on, we were some people were using hydroxychloroquine, and you may remember that we had an outbreak among nursing home patients, and I was actually involved in the decision to use hydroxychloroquine in those patients, and it was something that we didn't know. We didn't know what the right thing to do was, but we all saw what happened in other places, and we felt like doing nothing was the wrong thing to do. And so, we gave some patients hydroxychloroquine, small number, about 50 patients, seemed to have some benefit. But, as time went on and there are more studies coming out, then it doesn't seem like hydroxychloroquine really does a whole lot. Same thing with, ivermectin as well. Initially, there was some evidence in a test tube, and then some early clinical data say it may have some benefit, but it doesn't seem to really have a whole lot of benefit in treating this virus.
And when you mentioned hydroxychloroquine, I'll never get it right. Why can't they come up with a drug with a regular name? That's
it's to make sure we have jobs.
Yeah, Right. Yeah. I bring this up because this was an interesting thing as the topic. I said I would be bringing it up this week, and it's there. I read an interest because I saw this come out over the weekend that Science Magazine did. This is kind of the all-encompassing story that had been done. That there were 3 big studies done, and that it basically said that can it treat or prevent COVID-19, and the kind of the most active thing is no, it just not effective out there. But I don't put this out to say, hey, all these people who connected to this said it's a bad thing. What I'm talking about is that when you have something like COVID-19, when you have a pandemic, you do reach out for everything you can, do you not?
That's right. That's absolutely right. We did the same thing in the HIV epidemic, and early on, before we had effective therapies, we were trying all sorts of things. Some of them very wacky. Some of them had some benefit, but in the grand scheme of things, once we got better drugs, we abandoned them. And I think that's one of the things that we've learned in medicine is, in fact, there's an old song in medicine, never be the first one to start a new therapy or the last person to abandon it. We learn from our experience, and that's how we get better from it. So, drugs like hydroxychloroquine and ivermectin, I don't criticize anybody for using them. And I don't think it was necessarily a bad thing, but I think we've moved on. And I think that we have good data that there are drugs that are effective. And whereas these other drugs, we're still, does it work? Does it not work? I don't know. So why mess with them when you have things that work well? So,
right. And it gets into, I think a lot of it got politicized. You and I talked about this early on when hydroxychloroquine was being used in the nursing home in Texas City. Of, hey, let's not look at this as a political argument here of yes or no. Let's see what it does. Which was exciting. Yes, there were reports saying, hey, we don't think this is going to be effective. Others saying yes. And there have not been real studies. But again, it was one of those reaching out. And to give full credit, Dr. Robert Armstrong was the one, and he took a lot of hits for that. And still is. But it's one of those things of why knock it as snake oil, when at that time you didn't even have really good snake oil. As I tell folks all the time, that's all we had at the time. Outside, I remember about the only treatment at the time in the hospitals for patients was proning, was about to be the only thing that was found. Like, okay, we know this actually helps.
That's right. That's right. And we didn't have any antibiotics for it. And one of the things we learned was that actually was, for the sickest patients who got on a ventilator, the standard with other types of pneumonias was, okay, let's get people on a ventilator quickly so they don't wear out and they don't damage their lungs. Well, it turns out with COVID, you do that, you damage their lungs to the point that it's irreparable. And so, there were some things that we did very early on, which we've learned in retrospect were not the right things to do. And that happens all the time in medicine. And it just, when we have a pandemic the size of this, that has the impact of this, you learn those things pretty quickly.
And it's also one of those things, you had mentioned it early on in HIV, this was done. And it was talked about, but not at the same level. It was the live, as I say, it's almost live coverage of treating a pandemic. Yeah. But HIV at the time, was being almost all the attention was being focused on a certain segment of the population, right? Not a mass,
That's right.
That deal, which we found later also was wrong.
Yeah, that's right.
So many respects, and I point that out to folks. Listen, early on, the word was that if you're gay, HIV was only there.
Right.
That turned out to be absolutely not true.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, HIV infects some more. It affects everyone in society, and unfortunately for us in the United States, it hadn't reached that proportions. But in Africa, it actually did reach that.
Right.
And and that's what we face with COVID. Now, I'd say the big difference between HIV and COVID is that HIV was like months to years. COVID was days to weeks.
Right.
In terms of how rapidly things evolved, and it really felt the same way as it felt when I was a young doctor treating people with HIV. It just had that same sense of what are we doing, that same sense of urgency, that same sense of things moving very, very quickly.
One of the things, and you said this in our opening segment of this, is having COVID prior does provide some immunity.
Yeah.
And that was kind of somewhat a given, but not given a lot of credit now. Now, more and more studies have shown that if you had COVID prior, then you get vaccinated, then you get your booster. Wow. It's the improvement level is there, but you still have after having it. And it goes into there. I know there were a lot of people early on arguing that no, once I have it, I can't get it again.
Right.
Or I'm protected.
Right. Right.
Which we talked about that at the time. There was some understanding that would be accurate because it would be like other viruses. Yes, you'd have some type of protection, but it wouldn't be as good as having something else at the time without even having a vaccine at the time. Yeah. And I wonder on that end of obviously we don't wish that on anyone. That how we've changed as a society, on the medical side of things, so showing yes, this has some protection for you there.
Yeah, well, I think we have to be honest about it. You know, unfortunately, I think the whole whether COVID provided protection or not got politicized as well, right? And just like everything with this, you know, we went through a very contentious election, and everything got politicized. And but with that, some of the public health people, and I'm going to have to take some of the blame on this. You know, there's a fear that, well, if we say that getting prior infection helps protect you, then people won't get vaccinated.
Right.
Well, that did happen. That happened, right? There's some people who felt like, oh, I've been, I've had it, I don't have to get vaccinated. But in all honesty, what we learned was that the people that have the best immunity are people that have gotten it and then got vaccinated. Now, we're not arguing from a health point of view that you wait till you get it and then get vaccinated, because you have to survive it. And, the longest lasting immunity is the one, after you're dead, right? You don't have to worry about.
Well, and that goes into, it does make a point here is that it's a crapshoot if you say, let me just get sick with it.
Right. Right.
There's no guarantee you're going to come out of the other end of it.
Right. And I think what confuses people is that most people get sick with it are going to do okay. But some people are going to have long lasting effects and some people aren't going to survive. And that's the part that we're trying to avoid, is that people having the long lasting effects and then of course people dying.
The other is I find kind of fascinating with of all of this is that how fast the treatments have been.
Oh yeah.
Along the way, how fast they got to market would be the best way to explain it. Is that I don't think we've actually seen anything at this speed ever.
Never. No, it's unprecedented, and it's unprecedented in two levels. One is on the level of science, and the other is in the level of the regulations. Within weeks, and when I say weeks, I mean a couple weeks of the virus being isolated in China. It was in labs in the United States, and people at UTMB were sequencing it. And they knew every sequence in that virus. They knew everything there was to know about that virus. So just the ability to do that is unprecedented. And so what then that allows is then, okay, now we know what the virus is. How do we design a vaccine for it? And with the RNA technology, someone said, well, let's use the RNA technology. We'll just run this in. And it's the first time RNA vaccines have been used in widespread events. So that was something that was very new. And then on top of it, the FDA said, okay, we're not going to do this in the traditional way. The traditional way is step one, let's think about it. Step two, let's think about it. They said, no, let's do step 1, 2, 3 all at the same time.
Right.
As long as we don't see anything that's showing harm, we're going to move ahead. And, a lot of people say, well, that was too fast. But I got to tell you, there have been over 20 vaccine candidates that started off that route. And we've only had 3 in the United States that have made it.
Right.
Two of which we're still using. Right.
I wonder.
So the process, I think, worked itself out well. So between those two, I think they came up with a way of doing things much more safely and much more effectively than they've ever done before.
And I wonder, though, too, is with that now, do you think we see a change now in that on this approach? Maybe not totally like what we saw with COVID, because it was obviously a global pandemic. But that maybe a lot of these stopgaps that had been put in, that maybe some of those can be lifted, where the stopgaps are in place, but not necessarily where it's 10 years down the line before something really happens. I don't know, it's not always 10 years, but that's actually kind of the average before when something's approved for clinical trials to actually getting into the regular market.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see what they do, but I think it's going to be pretty hard to turn that clock back, right? Because the expectation has changed, and there are lots of people out there with chronic illnesses or severe illnesses for which there's no treatment, and family members are not going to tolerate having to wait 10 years. And so I think what we will see is probably a refinement of the regulatory process, so that if you have the information, you can move forward at a faster pace. Now, sometimes one of the biggest things for some of these rare diseases is that it's so uncommon. You can't collect all of the information you need. There's not enough patients out there to collect all the things that you need in a timely fashion that you can do all the statistics and prove it very quickly. And so that's always going to be something that will take more time. But I don't see us turning back the clock to the old way of doing it. I expect once, COVID is done, or once we're past the big hump, and, we deal with it on a regular day-to-day basis, that the regulatory agencies are going to be looking at the way they do things and say, okay, how do we do this better? And I'm sure Congress is going to say to them, how do you do this better? Right.
I wonder, though, too, matter of fact, this came from one of our viewers here, and she actually texted it to me directly. That's why it's not on screen. How about there are certain policies that put in place that really frustrate a lot of people. One in particular is if you had someone in the hospital, they couldn't come visit them, particularly if they had COVID.
Yeah.
As we see now, do you see maybe some changes in that, where there'd be some adjustments? Learning what we did before is that because the isolation on some folks, as we talk about the mental health of not only those who are able to see their loved ones, but those who are in the hospital, where I'm talking about there, but also the folks from the outside who are worried about the loved ones. I know one man whose wife was in the hospital, and he came visit her every day, had a dinner delivered to her up in her room, and he sat outside with a sign, and every day they had dinner together in some form. But that lasted 6 months. This was early on. But do you see maybe some of the changes in those policies?
Sure. Well, they've already started to change. There's actually been a change in state law that says you cannot deny people the right to see their family members, particularly if they're dying. And I agree with that. Now, you've got to be careful about how you do it. And I think we've seen enough of this pandemic that we know how to, when family members come in, how to dress them up and get them in the proper protective gear so that they're not going to get it and they're not going to spread it to other people and to take it home with them. So, so I think we're good with that. And I think if something like that comes in the future, we're gonna struggle with that again. If a new killer virus comes out early on, we probably will be very rigid until we figure out how to make sure that we can allow family members to to come visit and to support their families without putting them at risk.
And when we say support,
I think we were, and in retrospect, I think we were too rigid, because we knew long before these laws were passed that we could protect ourselves as healthcare workers, right? We knew what to do, so we could have done that with family members and loosened it up a little bit. But there's also, there's a comfort lever there. Okay, we got this. No, we're not going to change anything, because we don't want to mess with it.
But also, too, is that healthcare workers are held accountable by their bosses in there.
Yeah.
You got 10 people on a ward.
Yeah.
And 10 family members are all in at one time. You can't keep an eye.
Well, we wouldn't let 10. We wouldn't let 10 in, but we'd let one.
But I'm just saying. I'm give you an example.
Right.
There has to be something in place.
No, exactly. So you'd have to monitor it, you have to control it, and you have to make sure it's done safely. But I got to tell you, there was a time we had several outbreaks among healthcare workers at UTMB and at HCA, and guess what? It wasn't because they were following the rules. It was because after they got done their surgery, they all went to the break room and took their masks off, and they all broke the rules, and they all knew the rules.
Right.
And so it's where you have the variations and that things fall through the cracks. So you got to make sure that you have enough controls in there in place to make sure that you can do it safely.
One of the, and we talk about where family members, show support. One of the things is that a lot of times, particularly if you got a family member is on a ventilator,
Mhm.
that family members then can advocate
Yeah.
for things
Yeah.
because I think a lot of times I think some critiques were there was like folks could not advocate for their family members as strongly as they would want to.
Right.
I'm one of those. I'm really big on that. In fact,
Yeah.
when I'm been treated in the hospital or anything like that, I take full control. I'm talking to everyone. You have to talk to me. You can't just pass off and talk to one another. I have to be involved in the conversation.
Mhm.
And every conversation, I involve my wife so that she also knows what I have said or what has been said. And that I think also is something that can help in the process. We also know that it can also bog down the process sometimes there. And that's what I'm hearing from you is that there's a lot learned from this on how to deal with kind of these mass type of things because it becomes, but again, too, it's how it evolved. Yes, it may seem in hindsight, 2020 should have done that in December 2019 or, spring of 2020.
Yeah.
But in all reality, when you look back on it, is that the information you knew then, that's what the decision had to be. And as that time's evolved, we know better for the next time.
Well, we know better for the next. We know better for the next time, and we know a lot of lessons learned. And hopefully, that we will carry those lessons on to the next time. It doesn't always happen that way, though.
Yeah,
sometimes we have to learn the hard lessons over and over and over again.
Yeah, that's for medical professionals as well as patients. A lot of times. Question from Ray and Cindy Do: is it possible to explain when people in the same household all are vaxxed and boosted, one person gets COVID and is symptomatic, the others test negative, do not get sick?
Yeah.
With the high transmissibility rate, particularly, I guess, referring to Omicron, why that didn't happen in this household.
Yeah. God bless Pfizer. I mean, it's because the vaccine, that's how good this vaccine is. I mean, that's what we keep trying to tell people. It used to be if one person got it, everybody in the household got it. In 5 days, everybody got it. And now we have the scenario where everybody's vaccinated, boosted, and one person has the bad luck of getting it, but then the other people don't get it. I mean, that's how good these vaccines are.
And also, too, is that how your own physical body and your own can deal with infections, just like anything else. Come up with a similar line. Regina Haley's asking, she has a family member who's now in the ICU on a ventilator due to COVID, transferred from East Texas where they ran out of beds, she said later. But what do some people do okay with Omicron COVID and then some end up on a ventilator at this point? And she doesn't point out if this person was vaccinated or not ahead of time. But again, this goes into kind of the same thing of it's going to be different people, different ways for different people.
Right. And that's exactly right. We know Omicron is less likely to cause severe disease. And I think that's the important message to get. Some people took that message is that Omicron doesn't cause severe disease. And that's not true. Omicron does cause severe disease. Omicron does kill people. We're still seeing people die from Omicron. But if you look at the numbers, when we had Delta, the peak was this high. When you had Omicron, the peak is this high. And with that, even though it's a smaller proportion of people who get sick, the numbers were still pretty high. So it's part of it is, as you say, their condition. Part of it is just that interaction between their body and the virus. We still don't understand why some people get sick and others don't. We know that there are conditions that predispose it. We know that there's inflammation that goes on, but we still haven't quite figured out exactly what it is about, John that makes him get really sick and Joe, who looks just like him, not. And we see that.
But that would be the kind of commonplace for, I hate to use it because people compare Omicron, COVID to flu. But in that, what we see with corona-based viruses, that how one person reacts to it is different from another person?
Yeah, we see that. Basically, we see it with all diseases, right? There's always what we call spectrum of disease is the idea behind it. And that some people get very sick, some people have lots of complications, some people nothing. And everything in between.
Yeah. And speaking of Omicron, today I was seeing a television report on one of the morning shows about a subvariant the subvariant. We've talked about this some,
Right.
but that there's a subvariant of Omicron that's out there.
Mm-hmm.
It still does not seem to be, while it may be more infectious, it still seems to be less severe as far as symptoms are concerned.
Yeah, it's still
not seeing a large number of these subvariants, subvariant affecting people.
Yeah, it's about 1.2 times more infectious. We know that from Great Britain. We have it here in our community. I just got a report yesterday that out of 91 isolates, all of them were Omicron. 6 of them were the subvariant, the B2 variant subvariant. So it's about 5-6%, 7% of the virus that's circulating right now today. But it does not seem to make people very, very sick. We went through this with Delta. There was Delta Plus, and then there was Lambda, that was very close to Delta, and everyone was worried about, one might take over. And not a lot happened. And I think it's because the next big virus is going to have to be substantially different than Omicron to really cause a lot of problems, because there's a lot of immunity out there. And I personally don't expect a lot of problems with the Omicron B2 variant at this point.
The other is that Great Britain announced this week they're lifting most of their restrictions. California actually did as well this last week. Asked this question: are we in a more of a just live with it mode now with COVID-19, given the availability, I should say, of vaccines, Paxlovid and other therapies and pills out there right now?
Yeah, I think so. And I think so. It's because for a variety of reasons. One, I think the numbers are down, so that makes people feel much more comfortable with that. But I also think the public's tolerance for a lot of these restrictions has gone away. And you see it on both sides. You see it on the side of, people who have always been resistant to a lot of the restrictions. You can't tell me what to do. I don't want to do it. And then on the other side, you have, well, I'm vaccinated and I've boosted and, I'm doing everything I can. Why do I have to still restrict my life because of somebody who won't? And I think it's getting to the point where the political leaders have heard that, and you're going to see less and less restrictions all along. And from our point of view, from a public health point of view, it changes our messaging, right? So instead of saying, you must stay home, we say, you need to take stock of whether you're somebody who's going to get really sick if you get COVID and do these things. And if you're not, okay, fine. Right.
Do we see maybe the next time go around when we have something, let's just say similar to this, that happens, and instead of doing this wide brush approach where, entire industries go shut down, because that became somewhat of a farce in many ways too. And instead it's like, okay, in this specific area, we have this is what we have to do to kind of stop it. And we're going to go here and see what we can do to, stop it at this point.
Yeah, I think so. And that's one of the things we've been working on very hard, is to develop the informatics system so we can track the virus very precisely and knowing where we're seeing clusters of it. And so, so in the future, when things happen, we'll be able to react to the areas where it is. We didn't have that. That was, again, one of the things that COVID unmasked, is that our way of tracking a lot of these outbreaks is very, very antiquated, and it could not keep up. And so now that we use, modern databases that are cloud-based and, web-based servers, we can do this.
Anita Crisp has this question here. This one we get a lot. Does the PCR test let you know which variant someone has? Or are you taking a random number of tests to further the test for the type of variant? And it's the second part of that.
It's the latter, right? Yeah, we don't have the technology to do it on every test.
Yeah. And it simply is what you're finding is that you take random samples and say, and we'll say out of 100 tests that may be done in a day, that you're taking random samples of those and you're testing all of those to say, okay, which has this in it.
Yeah, we're doing about 30 a day. So we pull those from all the tests that come in and look and check those.
Right, which is a data, it's about a third of what, because it's about 100 tests a day right now. Is that what we're averaging?
Today we only had 28. Can you believe that?
28 total. Okay.
Yeah, it's great. It's great. But yeah, we've been running, our 7-day average is about 100 positives. That's right.
Gotcha. So that hopefully that helps. And we get that question a lot, by the way. That just it's one that comes up a whole lot with folks. Paxlovid, the pill.
Right.
I like to say you can get it at Walmart.
Yep.
How about anywhere else? A little more available. Are we starting to see the availability of that increase? And
yeah, it's
also
increasing.
because you and I talked about this off the air. Is it something that we'll start seeing, like if somebody is hospitalized, to be given Paxlovid?
Yeah, so that's a good question. Right now, it's not approved for people that are hospitalized. We, up until very recently, we didn't even have it at UTMB. We just got it a couple of weeks ago. It's every couple of weeks, there's a more allocation, and with the numbers going down, the demand for it's going down. So you're going to see it widely available. You should be able to get it at almost any pharmacy in about a month, would be my guess. Which means that when people get sick, they should go see their doctor, and they can get a pill, which will keep them from getting sick and help make them feel better. It's not approved for use in hospitalized patients at this point. But that being said, doctors being doctors, somebody's going to do it. So,
right. At some point, they're just going to kind of do it.
Right.
When we say it's not approved, when we say it's not approved, it doesn't mean that they can't do it, right? Or do you risk anything if a doctor in a hospital setting says, "No, we're going to go ahead and use it"?
It's probably low risk.
Yeah.
I think, it's still under what's called an EUA, an emergency use authorization. So technically what that means is that the government could come back and say, you use this outside the authorization. And the sanction would be is that they're not going to give any more pills.
Not going to get any more.
Yeah. That would be the sanction. But once it becomes approved by the FDA, then doctors can use it however they want.
Right, because then it's up to the doctor to make that decision too.
That's right.
We should point out, Paxlovid is under that emergency authorization. The vaccines are not. I want to, because that comes up still a lot. Everyone says, well, the vaccines are still emergency authorization. That went away a long time ago, actually.
Yeah, it did.
And so we need to, make sure people understand the vaccines are no longer emergency authorization. They are fully approved and able to use out there. Here, we'll bring this up here now because they'll get into one of the things I want to talk to you about. But I thought we'd have a little fun with it here now. This is now I want everyone to understand something here on this video. I shot this video myself. The one thing that's missing from all of this is that I get away from your wife. Not one bead got thrown my way. I just
we were trying to get the bags open. We already thrown a bunch out.
Yeah. So
look at my hand. Yeah. You see the bag.
I know you were trying to get that's the tough thing when you see somebody and you're trying and you're struggling to get the bags open. It takes a while.
Yeah.
And I'm teasing on that. For those that missed, we talked about this last week that Dr. Keiser was the Grand Marshal of the Crew of Gambrinus night parade on Saturday night at Mardi Gras. And that is his lovely bride with him on board there too. And so she was the co-Grand Marshal, I get to say. She's a healthcare worker. He was actually, as the Grand Marshal, but representing all healthcare workers in the county for that. And this, by the way, this Friday will at Mardi Gras in Galveston will be the first responders parade. During the Danny Weber fire truck parade, and they're going to be honoring all the first responders. In fact, there's a float that this year we saw that was great, and I know a lot of your staff is happy because you arranged for them to get into that first responders parade this weekend, right?
Yeah, no, we wanted to make sure. Right, and people don't think of public health as being first responders, but think of Walter Hall Park and that was probably the biggest example of what people saw. But people are going out from our health department every single day, giving vaccines, doing testing. There's a home down on Galveston where somebody got COVID, and they're down there this afternoon testing everybody there, and also giving boosters to anybody who needs them. So so they're out there, and they literally act like a SWAT team for COVID. And so we think it's that's good that they get to do this, but also to let people know that COVID's still an issue, and we're here to support them.
One of the things, so in that's some fun part, but some seriousness to talk about this is that there would be a time in which, and this is how things have evolved, that if there had been a mass gathering because of anything over 10 people at one point, we'd be saying, don't do it. Mardi Gras was canceled last year because of this. A lot of people think it was the freeze. Actually, it had been canceled long before the freeze, and then the freeze hit. That would have made it canceled. But the Houston Livestock Show and Rodeo last year, other big events, conventions, and the like in Galveston also canceled because of COVID-19. Where is the thought process changed on these type of events now? On that, there's still a cautionary tale, but it's also not a hey, don't do this warning from health officials, particularly.
Right. So I think things have changed a lot, and if you go back 2 years ago. Mardi Gras really contributed to the high number of cases they had in New Orleans. And they came pretty darn close to having their healthcare system collapse there. And we were watching that all with great interest and a lot of nervousness to see what would happen. And sure enough, a few weeks later, it came into our region as well. But a lot of things have changed. And so what's changed? Well, first of all, the vaccination rates. Secondly, the recognition that that outdoor events tend not to have a lot of transmission of the virus. And so, you think about, well, how do people get this? How do they get this in spring break? Well, it's the stuff that goes on inside. People go outside and then they go inside to the bars, they go inside to balls, they go inside to other things. And they've, had a lot of transmission. And one of the things that we've really, when everybody has told us, well, what do I do? I'm going to this ball. And it says, wear a mask, right? Wear a mask. If you're going inside, you're vaccinated. Yeah, I'm vaccinated. Wear a mask. And so I think, we're seeing people do that as well. And then when we look at the therapeutics we have available, if people get COVID, we have good ways to treat it if they get identified early. So I think that is change. That's another change that we've seen. And then with Omicron, the risk of getting sick is less. And so you add all those things together, it's probably okay. We'll see. I think, and I've been saying this for a couple of weeks, I think that Mardi Gras is the real stress test, right? So if, come spring break, we got a lot of cases, well, we know where it came from. And if it does,
right,
then we know we're really on a good path.
Right. And one of the things too, an event like this, it's more than just the crowds you see downtown or on the seawall, and it's the hotels, it's the restaurants. That's why those were always the concerns before, that it's more than just, hey, people gathering in one location. It is how that moves around during that time. Question from Sherry Gonzalez. She says, RA, I'm assuming she's saying rheumatoid arthritis. She's been vaxxed and boosted. Do I still need to wear a mask? She says. What do you take for your rheumatoid arthritis would be the question I would ask her. And so, if she's taking biologics that suppress her immune system, I'd really recommend that she wear a mask, because I think she would be at high risk. That's one of the things that you have to think about. We go back to Colin Powell. He had a disease that didn't allow the vaccine to work in him. So I don't know how well the vaccine would work with you if you're taking some of these drugs. The other thing to talk to your doctor about is a medication called Evashield, which is an IV infusion, which is exactly for those types of people who are not able to mount a good antibody response. And that's something that you get every 3 months, and it helps prevent you from getting COVID. And repeat that again and what that is, so I can make sure we. Evashield, Evusheld, and this is for people that are immune suppressed and who we expect not to mount a good antibody response either to the virus or to vaccines. And so we're very strongly recommending that people get that infusion. It's available at UTMB. We've got plenty of it. And, you should ask your doctor about it and get set up for an infusion if they think that's the right thing for you. So hopefully you heard that, and you can look it into yourself as well, and talk to your doctor, talk to doctors at UTMB. So there is an extra layer there for you. But the recommendation and direct answer to your question is go ahead and make sure you're wearing your mask as well. And although a lot of times we talk about the mask is to protect people around you, not necessarily yourself. If you have an N95, for example, that is protecting you as well. It's not, you don't want to go with a cloth mask in this case. Right. You want to go with that N95. And you can get an N95 at Walgreens or CVS, and they will give it to you for free. Yeah, and it's all available now and easy to get. Anita Crisp came back in and asked this when we came back, and I thought we talked about the pills that are out there. It says, what's the pill in? It's the same as the shot. No. In many ways, yes, it's mRNA technology, is it not? But it's
it's an antiviral. It's a virus. It's actually called a protease inhibitor. So it's much like the drugs that we used to treat HIV, except instead of engineered to inhibit the HIV virus making a protein. That's why they'll cut up the proteins into little pieces. It does it for the coronavirus. So a protease cuts bits of protein into little pieces which the virus can make its core out of, and it blocks that, and it seems to be very, very effective.
Gotcha. The other question is that Regina Haley comes on with us on a regular basis. Will another booster be needed this year, or will the vaccine become annual? I ask that, I think, every other week of you myself. Yeah. Where are we headed with this?
Yeah, it's a $64 billion question. There right now, a fourth dose is recommended for people that are immune suppressed. And there's a lot of debate as to whether we should be giving people that fourth dose. And there's not a lot of agreement. There's no formal recommendation from the CDC to get a fourth dose. But in Israel, in Great Britain, and other European countries, they are providing fourth doses for people. So, we're taking the attitude that, if you come in and tell us that you need that fourth dose because you think you're immune suppressed, you should go ahead and get it. But it wouldn't surprise me within the next several weeks to a month or so that there is a recommendation that everybody get a fourth dose.
Gotcha. And so when do you see we'll start seeing that go around on a more common basis, and how long until that's the recommendation?
Right.
That we have to wait for along those lines. And so we appreciate the comment there. Someone had come in there and was talking about the question we asked of Ms. Gonzalez here. We should point out we're not talking about masks overall, although they're still recommended. We're talking about specifically a question from a viewer of ours who asked about, she has rheumatoid arthritis, which is obviously is an immune issue for them and what they need to be doing. So that's something we need to make sure we allow to know. Right. Stephanie, and I don't know if she has the name, the name of this is Comirnaty Vax available. I think that's a misspelling of what Dr. Holtze, not Dr. Holtze, sorry, wrong guy. The Baylor College of Medicine group put together that's going worldwide.
Hotez.
Hotez. I said Holtze, wrong guy.
Yes, different doctor.
I think that's what she's referred to. That's not how it's spelled. I'll get that right. But I think that's being focused on international use.
Yeah, that's being developed in India. So they tested it in India, and the government of India bought it. And I'm not sure where that is in terms of actually deploying it. It's not approved by the FDA in the United States, and it's not available in the United States at this point.
We should point that out. That was I think that's the, and I'm looking it up now. So forgive me as I'm looking out there. Is because it has a different name than what she'd used there. But yeah, if you're referring to that, sorry about that. I am on that because I just wanted to make sure we had it right on that. So and so there's the vaccines that are available that is approved by the FDA for use here are Pfizer's, Moderna, and Johnson & Johnson.
That's right. That's correct.
Merck.
And the FDA also says that avoid the Johnson & Johnson if you can do it. So, right now, unless they're people that we know or strongly suspect are going to have a problem with the mRNA vaccines, we don't use the J&J vaccine.
Right. It's so primarily what the FDA recommendations are. And again, we said this a little bit earlier in the show. These are not emergency use authorizations. These are full authorizations. Right. Pfizer and Moderna. Those are the two shots go. Johnson & Johnson in a very limited basis as a comparative to that. And those are mass available and easy to get anywhere now. I mean, whether it's UTMB.
Oh, yeah.
So that's the, and forgive me, Stephanie, if Stephanie's coming back and says, but they're saying they're going to approve version will be marketed. It's approved already. That's what's going to be called. They may be coming up with their names already for later about that. and whatever names they come up with for the market are different than right now. We're just keeping it simple, saying Pfizer and Moderna.
Right. So there is a vaccine that's in development that is the improved version of the Pfizer vaccine, which is against the Omicron variant, and that's not available yet.
Okay. So if that's what she's asking about, then
yeah,
I just
that
want to
one's not available yet.
Gotcha. So good. So sorry about the confusion there, folks, of out there. So because this always does change on there, and those are the two. And that's why we have Dr. Keiser on, because if you're asking me this question, I wouldn't know what you're talking about at that time. That's why we have the expert on talk about these things. Speaking of Mardi Gras, as I said, the health district will have booths again this weekend.
That's
down
right.
there, Seawall and downtown, or just Seawall this time around?
Downtown. So we'll
Downtown.
have a booth downtown for the weekend, and also on Tuesday on Mardi Gras, and we'll be doing COVID testing and HIV testing and glucose testing and blood pressure testing. And if anybody wants a flu vaccine or a COVID vaccine or a COVID booster, we'll be able to give that to them there as well.
All available for you down there. So we'll have more details of that. Actually, we're going to be visiting those booths on Friday to show where you can go for those as well. All right. And as I told everyone earlier in the show, Dr. Keiser is going to take 2 weeks break from us here. And so we hope to resume mid part of March back with these. And so, again, we were trying to get as many new questions in today we haven't asked in a while. Some came from our viewers from the last show. Wanted to make sure we got them in now. Said next week and the week after, Dr. Keiser won't be on with us. And then we hope by the third week of March, I'm back on. So have yourself a good one, sir, as you get back out there and get to work with all the stuff you've got to do out there. And again, when we come back to that next show, we're going to talk a lot about one of the things that cardiac areas. I know February is Heart Health Month, but that's an area that folks are not been getting their checkups on. And because of this COVID-19 issues. And we need to really talk about those issues. That's something that needs to be talked about. We're going to talk about that, even though it'll be month of March. Cardiac, your heart doesn't go away once February. So we need to be talking about that and your regular screenings for everything else as well. So we appreciate Dr. Keiser as always for coming on with us. We appreciate your questions as well, folks. This has been What You Need to Know with Dr. Philip Keiser.